I noticed the group chat name change on a quiet Sunday morning while drinking coffee with my daughter, successful siblings Plush Margaret. The notification had been subtle. Someone had updated it overnight, probably thinking I wouldn't notice until the damage of humiliation had fully marinated. My 17-year-old Olivia saw it over my shoulder, her face crumbling with second-hand hurt. "Mom, that's so mean. Why would Uncle David do that?" But why was I laughing as I kissed her head and reached for my laptop, pulling up an email that would remind my siblings exactly who the least successful Whitmore really was? "Watch this, sweetheart," I said, attaching a single document to the family chat. The message was brief. "As majority shareholder of Whitmore Holdings with 52% voting control, I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Tuesday at 9 a.m. Attendance is mandatory for all family members currently employed by the company. Sincerely, Margaret Whitmore Collins, Chairwoman." My phone started ringing within 30 seconds. I let it go to voicemail. The Whitmore family had always measured success by visibility. My father, Richard Whitmore, built Whitmore Holdings from a single hardware store into a regional retail empire spanning 3 states. By the time he died, the company operated 47 locations, employed over 2,000 people, and generated $180 million in annual revenue. He had 4 children: David, the eldest and presumed heir; Caroline, the social butterfly who married well and served on charity boards; Thomas, the ambitious middle child who'd clawed his way to VP of Operations; and me, Margaret, the youngest, the quiet one, the daughter who'd rather read financial statements than attend galas. My siblings had always dismissed me. David ran the company as CEO, making decisions with flashy confidence and minimal substance. Caroline floated through board meetings between spa appointments. Thomas schemed constantly for more power, more recognition, more proof that he mattered. I kept the books, quietly, invisibly, for 23 years. What none of them realized, what they'd never bothered to understand, was that keeping the books meant understanding the company better than anyone. I knew every revenue stream, every vulnerability, every decision that had been made wisely, and every one that had been disastrously foolish. I also knew exactly how our father had structured his estate. Dad died 8 years ago, leaving a will that surprised everyone except me. He'd divided the company shares unequally, based not on birth order or gender, but on what he called demonstrated stewardship. David received 20%, Caroline received 10%, Thomas received 18%, I received 52%. The majority, controlling interest, the power to make any decision I wanted, overrule any vote, reshape the company according to my vision. My siblings had been furious. "This is a mistake," David had insisted at the reading. Dad was confused at the end. "Margaret doesn't know anything about running a business. She's just the accountant," Caroline added. "She's never managed anyone." "I'll contest this," Thomas threatened. "This isn't what Dad would have wanted." But it was exactly what Dad wanted. He'd told me privately, 2 months before he died, sitting in his study with the curtains drawn. "They think running a company is about being in charge," he'd said, "making speeches, taking credit, but you understand what it really is, serving the people who depend on you, making decisions that last beyond the next quarter." He'd squeezed my hand. "I'm giving you the power because I trust you not to abuse it. Don't let them push you out, Margaret. When the time comes, remind them who really keeps this family afloat." I'd waited 8 years for that time to come. The group chat had been the final straw. For 8 years I'd tolerated their condescension. I'd attended board meetings where David interrupted my analyses. I'd watched Caroline vote however Thomas told her to. I'd observed my brothers make decisions that prioritized their egos over the company's health. I'd allowed it because the company was still profitable, still growing, still serving its employees and communities. My patience had limits, but those limits were tied to outcomes, not personal pride. Then the chat name changed. Successful siblings Plush Margaret. It was petty, childish, the kind of casual cruelty that exposed how they really saw me, not as a partner or equal, but as a charity case, the family burden they'd graciously allowed to remain involved despite her obvious inadequacy. David had renamed it. I could tell by the timing, 2 a.m., after he'd been drinking, probably laughing with Thomas about their disappointing sister. They'd forgotten I could see the notification. They'd forgotten, more importantly, that I held the controlling shares. David called 7 times before I answered. "Margaret, what is this about an emergency board meeting? You can't just call meetings without consulting me." "I can, actually. Check the bylaws. Majority shareholders can convene emergency sessions with 48 hours notice for matters affecting company governance." "What governance matters?" "Nothing's happening. The chat name, that's what's happening." Silence. "Margaret, that was a joke. Thomas suggested it and I thought, you thought I wouldn't notice, or that I'd notice and feel appropriately diminished." I kept my voice level. "Here's what's actually going to happen, David. On Tuesday, we're going to discuss the company's leadership structure. We're going to review performance metrics for all senior family members. And we're going to make some changes. Changes? You can't just, I own 52% of this company. I can do whatever I want. The question is whether you want to cooperate or make this difficult. I hung up. Tuesday arrived with tension thick enough to cut. The board meeting was held in the Whitmore Holdings conference room, the same room where my father had run meetings for 30 years, where his portrait still hung above the fireplace. I arrived early, arranged my documents, and waited. David entered first, his face a mask of controlled fury. Caroline followed, looking confused and slightly hungover. Thomas brought a lawyer. Really? I asked mildly. Legal representation for a family board meeting. Protecting my interests, Thomas said, since apparently my sister has decided to stage a coup. Not a coup, a correction. I gestured for everyone to sit. Let's begin. The meeting lasted 3 hours. I walked them through 8 years of financial data, decisions they'd made that cost the company money, opportunities they'd missed because of ego, instances where I'd quietly fixed problems they'd created without ever receiving credit. I showed them the projections, how their current trajectory would lead to stagnation within 5 years, how competitors were gaining ground while they fought over corner offices, and then I presented my proposal. Effective immediately, I'm assuming the role of executive chairwoman, I announced. David shot to his feet. You can't do that. Sit down. My voice was quiet but carried steel. I'm not finished. He sat. David, you'll remain CEO, but with significantly reduced autonomy. All decisions above $500,000 require my approval. All strategic initiatives require board approval, which means my approval. I turned to Thomas. You'll continue as VP of Operations, but you'll report to a new COO I'm hiring from outside the family, someone with actual operational expertise. This is humiliating. No, Thomas. The group chat was humiliating. This is accountability. I looked at Caroline. You have 2 choices. Sell your shares back to the company at fair market value, or actually attend board meetings sober and prepared. No more proxy voting based on whatever Thomas tells you. Caroline's face reddened. I attend meetings. You've been present at meetings. There's a difference. The argument that followed was spectacular. David threatened to resign. I accepted his resignation on the spot, which made him immediately retract it. Thomas's lawyer attempted to raise procedural objections that I dismantled with citations to our company bylaws I'd helped draft and knew better than anyone. Caroline cried, which might have affected me if I hadn't seen her use the same tactic to manipulate our father for decades. By noon, they'd all agreed to my terms. They had no choice. I held the votes. I held the power. And for the first time in 8 years, they understood that the sister they dismissed had been running things all along. One more item, I said as the meeting concluded. The group chat. I want it renamed. David's jaw tightened. Fine, what do you want it called? How about just Whitmore Family? No commentary on relative success, no rankings, just family. I smiled. Unless you'd prefer Margaret Farplaki with Roy Howes. No one laughed. The chat was renamed within the hour. The next 18 months transformed Whitmore Holdings. I hired the COO I'd mentioned, a brilliant operations executive named Sandra Washington, who had no patience for family politics and cared only about results. Together we modernized our supply chain, expanded into e-commerce, and improved employee benefits in ways that reduced turnover and increased productivity. Revenue grew 23% in the first year. David, to his credit, adapted. Stripped of his unilateral authority, he focused on what he actually did well: client relationships and public representation. He was excellent at shaking hands and giving speeches. He just shouldn't have been making decisions alone. Thomas never stopped resenting me. He left after 14 months to start his own venture, selling his shares back to the company at a premium I authorized because his departure was worth the price. Last I heard, his startup had failed twice, and he was consulting for a competitor. Caroline surprised everyone. Forced to actually engage with the business, she discovered she had a talent for marketing. She now runs our social media strategy and has increased brand awareness significantly. We don't talk about the years she spent sleepwalking through her role. Olivia asked me about it last week. We were having dinner, just the 2 of us, her father traveling for work, and she'd been quiet all evening. Mom, why didn't you take over the company earlier, if you had the power all along? Because having power and using it are different things. I set down my fork. I wanted to give them the chance to be good partners, to treat me with respect, to recognize what I contributed. But they didn't. No, they didn't. They named a chat to mock me instead. So the group chat was like, the last straw. Something like that. Your grandfather used to say that patience isn't weakness, it's strategic. You wait for the right moment, the moment when action will be most effective. I smiled.
The group chat gave me the perfect opening. They'd documented their contempt in writing. They'd made it impossible for anyone to claim I was overreacting. That's kind of brilliant. That's kind of accounting. You document everything. Then you use the documentation when needed. Mine won't for can't. The family dynamic has shifted permanently. We're not close. Too much history for that. But we're functional, professional. The petty cruelties have stopped, replaced by a wary respect that comes from understanding the real power structure. David still chairs public events, still gives the speeches, still takes the credit in ways that don't bother me anymore. I know what I contribute. The balance sheet knows what I contribute. Caroline and I have lunch occasionally. She's apologized, sincerely, for years of dismissiveness. I've accepted the apology without fully forgiving. Some things leave marks that don't fade entirely. Thomas sends Christmas cards. I send them back unopened. Some relationships aren't worth repairing. And the group chat, it's still called Whitmore Family. The messages are sparse. Logistics about holidays, updates about the business, occasional photos of grandchildren. No one has suggested renaming it. Terken the datu er fist what comes drop. The mark pay but the compass start come. But you have to more see nittimus trunters tor use session tried perm some sterling permisi Darren. She stole those projectinapi. Thomas tor use since six stool tool you've but bit the gadotan it might. Last month, I gave a speech at a women's business conference. The topic was leadership, and I shared the group chat story. Anonymized, details changed, but the essence intact. How my family had dismissed me for decades, how I'd waited for the right moment, how I'd used their own contempt as the catalyst for change. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 25, clearly early in her career, and she'd been crying. "My family does the same thing to me," she said. "I'm the one who actually does the work, but my brothers get all the credit. They make jokes about me being the helper. Document everything," I told her. "Keep records of your contributions. Build your expertise until it's undeniable. And when the moment comes, when they push too far, be ready." How do I know when that moment is? I thought about the group chat, about successful siblings plus Margaret, about the casual cruelty that had finally crossed my line. "You'll know," I said. "Something will happen that makes patience impossible, and when it does, make sure you're holding all the cards." She hugged me, this stranger, and I let her, because I'd been where she was, underestimated, dismissed, waiting for my moment, and when it came, I was ready. They thought the quiet one wasn't paying attention. They renamed the chat to remind me of my place, beneath them, beside them only by their generosity. But I'd been paying attention for 23 years, watching, learning, holding 52% of everything they thought was theirs. The group chat was supposed to be a joke. It became my invitation. Now the company runs better than ever, and the family knows exactly who's been carrying them all along. The quiet ones usually do.